All right, TVNZ is back in the headlines. You'll know by now about the departure of news boss Bill Ralston, with talk of big changes at the state-owned broadcaster. Let's look at this and other media matters with commentators Deborah and Wayne Hope. Good morning to you both.
Hi.
First of all, let's look at the calls from a bank this week that the time is ripe for the government to sell TV2. What do you make of that, Deborah?
The time's been ripe for the last 15 years,
so
in my opinion.
You're in favour?
Of course. I just philosophically
Déjà
don't agree with governments being involved in commercial broadcasting because I don't think that they're the best owners of...
Although you would be suggesting a sale of Television New Zealand rather than just TV2.
Well, it's interesting, actually, because you know how... I mean, I know this will come as a great shock to you, but TVNZ goes through quite frequent restructurings. In fact, they seem to happen with monotonous regularity.
You're talking about a new couch again, aren't you?
But the thing is that they sort of split the two channels and make them sort of stand alone for a while, and then they've been in the process of putting them back together again. So it really wouldn't be a good time to try and sell off one bit,
No, you're
because
right.
frankly you'd have to go through another huge big upheaval in order to separate off what bits actually belong to
Well, because
TV2.
that's a good question. What actually is TV2? I mean, it sounds an easy question to answer, but when it comes down to it, what is it? Wayne, they're suggesting, of course, that what you do with the proceeds is it helps you run a fully integrated, charter-driven TV1.
What a joke. They're asking for, you know, public service television, no ads on TV1, that's fine, while taking away the major commercial revenue stream of TVNZ, namely TV2, and then you run it on the cheap. Meanwhile, Treasury's still asking for its dividends. I mean,
so you're talking the worst of both worlds?
Oh, absolutely. It'll just make public broadcasting wither on the vine. And if that scenario was to occur, the cutbacks we're seeing now, including in news and current affairs, would be even worse.
All right, let's talk about the high-profile coverage of Bill Ralston's departure from Television New Zealand.
Oh, God, I mean, if I worked at TVNZ, I must say I would get really rather tired of the way that the media TV3 can do no wrong, and I can't wait till sometime TV3 will falter and then they won't be able to do anything right, because that's just the way the media works, by building them up and then knocking them down. So, I mean, I think a lot of this coverage is still in that sort of mould, which is we've got TV3 as this little underdog, which is actually rubbish because they're owned by a huge multinational organisation out of Canada. They're not a little underdog anymore at all.
I think we should look at the underlying reasons for this. There's two reasons, and they're connected. One is ratings pressure on TVNZ, especially in the news and current affairs shows. And the second reason is Treasury's demand for a dividend, which undercuts the principles of public broadcasting, because a lot of news and current affairs staff are going to go. What does this mean for the Charter? Is the government interested about this?
And the great irony is here, the suggestion is these staff are perhaps going to go at the very time you're going to expand your broadcasting operation through the digital channels.
Well, when I was last on the show talking about the digital channels, I was worried that there would be lots more channels and not so much in the way of content, and this tends to demonstrate my fears.
In terms of the job losses, the focus that there has been on that, has the coverage of that been reasonable, do you think? And I'm thinking here of the use of unnamed insiders who really are giving their, presumably, very biased opinions.
Well, I don't know.
Well,
I
New
actually
Zealand's a small
haven't covered...
place.
I mean, I
New Zealand's a
covered
small
this round
place.
for years, and you wouldn't get stories unless you used unnamed insiders. And often, with some of the people, I can guess who some of the insiders are, and they're the well-connected people, so that's how you get the story.
But usually they have enormous axes to grind, don't they?
Oh, of course.
Or they wouldn't be prepared to speak in the first place. You're not getting the opinion of the average employee, you're getting the opinion of the disgruntled employee.
There's been some spin, though, that comes from inside the company that is... It's just part of covering the media industry, and I think that, you know, with the way that the media is changing with blogs and things, you kind of think, well, I think those inside voices are actually valuable.
Okay, so Deborah, you're absolutely in favour of using unnamed insiders. What do you make of that?
Look, New Zealand's like Picton Island, although we're better behaved slightly. Inside sources are just the name of the game.
All right. Finally, let's talk further afield. News of the World, their royal editor is now in the clink. The editor of News of the World has stood down. It's interesting, isn't it? Clearly, they broke the law.
They never realised that, though.
Rupert Murdoch also broke the law. He runs the newspaper. Those guys are just the four guys. Let there be no mistake. It's routine practice to bug, royal affairs matters, like Prince Charles's secretary.
This was at the extreme end, though. That you wouldn't call that routine, would you?
No, look, they were also bugging the headquarters of the head of the Professional Footballers Association because a football celeb story is terrific.
Yeah, absolutely.
But this wasn't bugging. This was just dialing in and getting someone's messages, which makes you kind of think how easy it is to do.
Should Clive Goodman should he be locked up right at the moment, or is it?
Well, it's
does
quite
it fall
ironic
on the
because
editor?
it comes at the time when they're saying they've got no prison room for any real criminals, you know. So, but
Well,
you know,
of course,
and you know, he was called.
And of course he should,
best-dressed criminal they've
but
got.
he shouldn't be the only one in the dock. And let's not forget the reason this is happening. These kinds of stories have such huge market value, and the commercially driven tabloid sector in the UK is so cutthroat that these kinds of methods to get the story are absolutely standard practice.
And you know,
Because it
he was
represents
called the
big money.
eternal flame because
Yes.
he never went out.
It's-
So he was down on his luck,
This is
really.
what market-driven journalism actually brings us to.
All right.
Law-breaking and sordid ethics.
Deborah Hill-Cohn and Wayne Hope, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Paul.